Senator Thomas and also Senator Belanger. You know, I'm actually honored to sit up here at this table and really speak outside of maybe what you all are going to talk about in a little while. And I had called Senator Belanger about some of these proposed changes here a couple days ago, and I just said, as a constituent, as a sportsman, and the idea was kind of formulated of, well, you know, I think this might need to come to to a public meeting. And he kind of said, well, why don't you talk? And I said, well, I'd be glad to do that. And I was anticipating maybe 20 or 30 people here tonight, and I don't mean to say that I'm standing up here as a representative of Safari Club with any special preference, but that's kind of how it morphed into what it is, and I'm able to sit here and talk on behalf of both myself as a sportsman and sort of my organization, which is Safari Club International. And I think the only reason Senator Belanger and Senator Thomas asked me to sit here tonight is simply because we've been very active and spent a lot of money on research here in the Valley to determine some of the problems that we're talking about, which sort of came into this these new proposed changes. So with that, I would just like to thank Senator Scott Belanger and Senator Thomas for making this event possible tonight. It's refreshing to see these gentlemen that represent our districts take their time to listen to us as sportsmen and conservationists to take our positions on issues like this back to Helena if necessary. You know, I'm a fourth generation Bitterrooter here, and I've got two little granddaughters that make it 6 generations that have called the Bitterroot our home permanently. Hunting has been our tradition in our family since settling here. And I'm passionate about the sport of hunting as a primary driver towards successful wildlife management and conservation work. Not only here in the Bitterroot, but worldwide. So when there's a potential challenge or when the possibility of lost hunting opportunity arises, whether it's for the existing hunting demographic or whether it's for a new hunter recruitment, I believe certain cautions need to be taken to be clear. Actions such as these proposals tonight are warranted and absolutely necessary for the resource. These are big changes here in the Bitterroot that are being proposed. As Senator Thomas mentioned, I'm also the regional regional representative for Safari Club International, which my district includes the state of Montana and our 4 and just coming 5 chapters here in the state. Safari Club International is known as First for Hunters. And the Safari Club International Foundation, which is sort of our sister, is known as First for Wildlife. Both have been very active and invested heavily in conservation issues here in the Bitterroot Valley. And some of these changes we're discussing here tonight, where they're proposed. Since 1999, Safari Club International has invested some $600,000 in judiciary matters, and we fought vehemently through our Washington, D.C. office with thousands of man-hours to bring wolf management back to the individual states from federal protections that were here before. You know, again, this is after these things were forced upon us and back in the 1990s, meaning wolves. Since then, we've also been a major contributor in the ongoing elk and predator studies here in the South Bitterroot. And we've been anxious and engaged in the findings of these wildlife studies to make sure that management policies are put in place based on the contributing factors that were identified to our once diminishing herds in these areas, particularly the elk. I promise I'm not here to be an obstructionist or oppose decisions made by this agency just to oppose them. I think we've demonstrated from our investment and our partnerships in the past, Safari Club International values its relationship with this agency and all the others as well. However, SCI is committed to a couple of primary things. Number one is growing the resource we hunt while following the North American model for wildlife conservation. While number two, protecting our ability to hunt and creating abundant opportunities to do so when available. This is what I'm not sure of, is whether we've gotten enough time to see the benefits from the policy implementations already in place in the Bitterroot by the Fish and Game these past couple of years. We've already limited hunter harvest opportunities from years back and increased pressure on bears and lions, and this seems to be working. We also now have more tools in the box for wolf management from recent successes in the state legislature, such as House Bill 73, which both of these senators supported and lobbied for, which resulted in a more liberal wolf quota and more wolf harvest methods across the entire state. These new wolf tools will be in addition to what showed, perhaps, was already working down here. You know, I pulled a quote, and it said, Elbert Hubbard is quoted as saying, "How many a man has thrown up his hands at a time when a little more effort, a little more patience would have achieved success?" And again, I wonder if this is not the case here without the need for additional sacrifice to hunters. In May of just this year, Mike Thompson, our regional wildlife manager, is published as saying, "We're experiencing higher calf production and survival, being up from 2008 levels of 14 calves per 100 cows to 2013 levels of 25 cows per 100 cows on a valley-wide average." Mike was also quoted as saying our bull-to-cow ratios were okay biologically, even back then, with enough bulls to take care of the breeding, he said. Then he referenced a problem with growing bulls was due to the low cow calf recruitment and the numbers referenced in prior years. This would seem to indicate our bull numbers will dramatically increase with the new higher calf recruitment numbers, which are documented. This was all just this spring. Mike goes on to say it's a goal to reintroduce more hunting back in the Bitterroot, getting it back the way it used to be, so that we can hunt in a sustainable fashion that we can count on year after year. Then in October, just going into this season, Mike said it's shaping up to be a good year in this region. For the second year in a row, elk numbers have continued to grow in both the east and west forks of the Bitterroot. He said we had the first highest elk count in 270 that we've ever had. And hunters had stepped up to allow this to happen. It seemed to be working under the present efforts with a talk of a goal to increase hunter opportunities when possible. What changed so dramatically since these statements just a few months ago? You know, I'm also honored to sit on the Bitterroot Valley Elk Working Group. Tom Powers did a fantastic job on that before, and I stepped in behind Tom. And this board acts as, or this committee acts as an advisory council to Fish, Wildlife, and Parks on issues that affect elk in our valley. It's made up of a diverse group of people representing positions of landowners, conservation organizations such as mine, archery hunters, farmers, the outfitting industry, and much more. This group has been in existence for nearly a decade. You know how much time and energy we put into these proposals at the Elk Working Group? Take a guess. Zero. None. We weren't even informed of these proposals by an email. I read about them in a paper. You know, evidence clearly shows the proposals that were drafted were between the Ravalli County Fish and Wildlife Group and Fish and Game only. We're here tonight to discuss these proposals, which could conceivably impact every hunter in the valley. Based on what? Science or the special interest of a few? I've spent hours evaluating these elk and deer proposals and boundary changes, and I challenge anyone not to call them confusing at best. This in itself is an adverse impact on hunters, and it's hard for us to figure those out. We're going to hear from proponents of these proposals that we're not losing hunting opportunity, and this is a vital thing for the resource. And I have to challenge that in a number of ways. I've already referenced, does science support these proposed changes? On the hunter opportunity side, if you've accumulated the 12 bonus points for a coveted elk tag over in the breaks or the highwoods like I have, and if you ever want to hunt a bull elk here in the Bitterroot again, under these proposals, you can kiss your chances of drawing that breaks tag goodbye, because your bonus points are going to go to this unlimited Bitterroot tag. I can assure you from research I've completed in this state, once the Bitterroot goes to an all-draw bull elk harvest opportunity, we'll face a daunting task to ever get over the counter bull tags back here again. This is a fact. And we need to determine if this is what we have to endure as hunters. And I'm willing to do things as a hunter, given the current science available. There's a lot of hunting opportunities for elk and deer that are also affected by these proposals as well. And I've been asked to kind of talk about those, and I hope you're familiar with them. I hope everybody had the opportunity to read these new proposed changes, because they're really, really complicated. Partly, they include eliminating cow harvest through special B tags, for instance, up in Area 240. This is in an area where my ranch is, west of Victor, where these tags are desperately needed to manage this growing herd of over 200 head of elk. These are proposals that allow cows to be taken with a rifle until November 2nd on a general tag. But it's typically after the first cold snap hits in mid-November when they're actually tearing into the haystacks and moving from the bottom residential areas up to the west. I don't know if we're going to kill these elk under this scenario. These B-tag hunters are easy to manage for us as landowners with this elk herd. Many people also rely on, and I'm going to touch on whitetail here really quick, many people also rely on primitive weapons that are not archery hunters. You know, we rely on these tags to fill our freezers even if we don't archery hunt. The 260-30 tag is disappearing from these hunters with shotguns and muzzle loaders, as I understand it, under this proposal. And there's a substantial reduction of days allowed to harvest whitetail does, even with your A tag. The opportunity now cuts off after only 9 days of the season to shoot a whitetail doe with your A tag. Archery hunters will also have whitetail tag limits lowered from 5 to 3. This includes the Bitterroot Valley or the Bitterroot River bottoms, and some of the private lands. And I'm questioning what science shows that our whitetail herds are diminishing here in the valley to support these changes. And honestly, the best reason I've heard so far is that the reductions on whitetail doe harvest is due to increased traffic mortalities on Highway 93. That's what I've heard. Why wouldn't we put more in the freezer instead of in the borrow pits if that's the case? There's a lot of shuffling going around with these proposals, and some up and some down, and some of them are kind of all around. The bottom line is, are these proposals absolutely necessary for the resource to reach management objectives? And must hunters sacrifice further? Mike told us what we had was going in the right direction long before these proposals came about. Hunters have already sacrificed and tolerated empty freezers to get things moving in this way. We were the first to step up. I don't know if we need to continue to do that. Once again, are these proposals warranted for the big game that we're hunting? It will ultimately be determined by the voice that we hear tonight and voices across the region next month. Is the department and the commission willing to listen? Even to Mr. Hubbard, who said, don't throw up your hands at a time when a little more effort, a little more patience would have achieved success. From my perspective, I hope so. You know, one thing that I think we need to consider, particularly on these boundary changes in the South Valley, is the Bitterroot Valley is blessed with some of the best elk data and statistics in the state. And this data is decades old from aerial surveys, where elk have grown, where elk have had problems, and so on. You start messing with boundaries, and you start changing a measurable metric that we currently have that we can follow within this valley, and then people who come in from different administrations or different ideas or philosophies can skew these numbers however they want. You've got to be really careful with changing what is a measurable metric of elk habitat, elk survival, elk recruitment over decades. So you have to be really careful with that. I know there's some concerns with law enforcement, how 270 and 250 maybe can overlap. You know, poachers are poachers. We've got to take care of the bad apples as we always have. But I don't know that that justifies changing decades-old data. That's what I have to say about the changing the boundary.